The sea was black that morning. Not with storm clouds, but with smoke, thick, heavy, rolling across the horizon like a curtain drawn by unseen hands. Underneath it moved the last heartbeat of the Imperial Japanese Navy. October 1944, the world's greatest armada was gathering in the Pacific. American carriers, destroyers, and battleships, all converging on the Philippines. The Japanese Empire was cornered, bleeding, desperate. But one man still carried the ghost of the old code, the spirit. The order came before dawn. Inside the steel belly of the battleship Yamato, the klaxon rang once, a low, solemn sound that echoed through metal corridors like the heartbeat of something ancient. Men rose from their bunks in silence. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. October 22, 1944. The combined fleet was moving south. The great ships of the Imperial Navy, Yamato, Musashi, Nagato, and a dozen cruisers and destroyers, slipped out of Brunei Bay under a sky washed pale by starlight. Engines rumbled like distant thunder. Oil shimmered across the water, catching the reflection of burning fuel from the previous night's raids. Every sailor aboard knew what this meant. This was the final voyage. The Empire had gathered everything that remained of its strength and poured it into the sea. Admiral Takeo Kurita stood on the bridge, the wind cold against his face. He was 56, but war had aged him beyond his years. The lines around his eyes were carved deep, marks left by too many nights of waiting for orders that never made sense, of watching friends vanish into the sea. He had seen glory once, at Midway, at the Java Sea, when Japan's power seemed unstoppable. Now he commanded ghosts, proud ships sailing toward destiny with empty fuel tanks and half-trained crews. The officers saluted as he entered the bridge. Kurita nodded once, slowly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Forward, he murmured. The word was small, but it carried the weight of a dying empire. The fleet stretched for miles, a dark procession across the Philippine Sea. Their objective was simple, on paper: cut through the San Bernardino Strait, strike the American invasion forces landing at Leyte, and destroy their transports before reinforcements could arrive. But the plan itself was madness, a desperate dream drawn on maps by men who no longer understood reality. Intelligence was broken, fuel was scarce, air cover was gone. The Imperial Navy, once the terror of the Pacific, now sailed without eyes in the sky. And yet, every man aboard believed in something larger than victory. They believed in duty. They believed that even if they sank, the Emperor would know they had gone down fighting. In the early light of morning, Musashi loomed beside Yamato, her guns silent, her decks crowded with sailors watching the endless sea. She was a floating mountain, bristling with armor and firepower, her gray hull glistening like a sword blade. Some whispered that she was invincible. Others, quietly, feared that nothing man-made was invincible anymore. Kurita knew both truths. He also knew that American eyes were watching them even now, somewhere beyond the clouds, somewhere in the invisible ether of radio waves. The sea was no longer the only battlefield. The air itself had turned against them. As the day passed, messages crackled across the fleet's radios, coded reports from submarines, air patrols, distant pickets. Static hissed between the words, like ghosts trying to speak. Every sound made the radio operators flinch. The Americans were masters of deception now, flooding the air with false coordinates, phantom fleets, imaginary task forces that danced on the radar screens like mirages. Kurita's staff officers gathered around the plotting table, tracing lines across charts. One officer pointed toward a cluster of false contacts east of Luzon. There, Admiral, the enemy carriers. Kurita studied the board. Something in him hesitated, a quiet doubt. He had learned to trust his instincts more than any signal. But the younger officers, hungry for action, pressed him. If we strike fast, we can surprise them. He gave a slow nod. Prepare to alter course. The words sealed their fate. That night, the sea turned cruel. Waves rose high as the wind howled through the rigging. Lightning flashed far away, illuminating the silhouettes of the ships like ghosts frozen in light. On the deck of Yamato, sailors huddled against the railings, drenched in rain and spray. They spoke of home, of wives, of children, of small gardens left behind in Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Yokosuka. One young sailor whispered, "Do you think we'll see them again?" Another replied quietly, "We'll see them when we reach the other shore." None of them knew which shore he meant. By dawn, the storm had passed, but the sky was not clear. Far to the north, American carrier aircraft were already searching. The first contact came just before noon. Lookouts screamed. Black dots appeared against the silver clouds. The dots became planes. The planes became death. Bombs whistled down through the air, tearing into Musashi's decks. Columns of smoke rose skyward as the ship shuddered. Anti-aircraft guns opened fire, tracers streaking upward like desperate prayers. Kurita watched from Yamato's bridge as the sky turned into chaos. Musashi fought like a wounded beast, her crew refusing to surrender. She took one hit, then another, until the sea around her boiled. Even as she sank, her guns kept firing, hurling flame at the heavens. By the time the attack ended, Musashi was gone. The pride of the Imperial Navy slipped beneath the waves, leaving only burning oil and scattered debris. More than 1,000 men went down with her. Kurita turned away, his hands gripping the railing. There was nothing left to say. He had watched half his power vanish in an hour. Yet the order came from Tokyo, advance. So he did. That night, under a blood-red sunset, Kurita gathered his remaining officers in the war room. The lights flickered as the ship rolled gently in the swell. The air smelled of smoke and engine oil. He looked at their faces, tired, proud, afraid. Each man understood what awaited them. No one asked for mercy. Kurita spoke softly. "We are no longer fighting for victory. We are fighting for meaning. Let no one say the Imperial Navy died without courage." Silence filled the room. Then, quietly, the men bowed their heads. Outside, the sea whispered against the hull. In the distance, thunder rolled again, but it was not a storm this time. It was the sound of another fleet. The Americans were waiting. Their radar screens glowed in the dark like circles of prophecy. Their pilots tightened their straps and loaded their bombs. Their destroyers moved into position like wolves in the mist. And somewhere beyond the horizon, Kurita's fleet sailed straight into their trap, guided by shadows, deceived by signals, driven by an honor that no longer belonged to this world. The sea was calm, too calm. The horizon shimmered like glass, broken only by the ghostly wakes of giant ships pushing eastward. The storm of steel that had left Brunei now drifted in eerie silence. But above that stillness, invisible waves were already moving, waves of electricity, deception, and code. The Americans were watching. From carriers hundreds of miles away, aircraft circled like hawks, reporting every movement, every shimmer of sunlight reflecting off steel. From deep inside submarines, sonar men listened to the thunder of Kurita's engines echoing through the depths. And high above, on radar screens glowing in darkened rooms, phantom dots began to appear, some real, others not. Kurita didn't know it yet, but he was no longer sailing through the ocean. He was sailing through a maze of ghosts. On the bridge of the Yamato, Kurita's officers argued quietly. The charts showed one thing, the signals another. American ships seemed to vanish and reappear on the radar. Reports of enemy carriers sighted flashed across the radio, but when the fleet adjusted course, nothing was there. It was the beginning of a new kind of war. One fought not with bullets, but with frequencies and illusions. The Americans called it electronic warfare. The Japanese, still bound by their warrior traditions, had no name for it. To them, it was sorcery. As night fell, the ocean turned black again, but this time, filled with fear. Signals came in waves. Some said the Americans were retreating. Others said they were preparing a trap. Kurita's mind, sharp but exhausted, was torn between logic and instinct. He remembered the Musashi, the screams, the flames. He could still see the eyes of the sailors swallowed by the sea. And yet, the Emperor's order echoed in his head, advance. Do not turn back. So he advanced. At dawn, the first American planes appeared again, small shadows high in the sun. They didn't attack immediately. They circled, observed, vanished. Kurita didn't realize that each one carried cameras, transmitters, and radar reflectors, sending every detail back to the American fleet. By noon, the Japanese formation had fractured. Smoke from anti-aircraft fire clouded the horizon. Ships zigzagged to avoid torpedoes and bombs. But the worst confusion came not from what they could see, but from what they thought they saw. Phantom contacts appeared on the radar. Whole fleets seemed to emerge and disappear within minutes. False Morse signals filled the air. A coded American transmission, deliberately leaked, claimed that U.S. carriers were moving north. Kurita believed it. He shifted course, chasing shadows that didn't exist. For the Americans, this was perfect. Their true carrier force had moved south, and now, small escort carriers, destroyers, and a handful of planes stood alone off Samar Island. They were the last line of defense between Kurita and the invasion beaches at Leyte. The Americans called them Taffy 3. Tiny ships. No armor. No heavy guns. Just courage. And that was about to be tested beyond imagination. As the sun broke through the clouds on the morning of October 25, 1944, Kurita's lookout shouted, "Enemy sighted." Through his binoculars, Kurita saw what he thought were fleet carriers and cruisers. He didn't know they were escort carriers, small, fragile ships meant for anti-submarine patrols. He saw smoke, planes, silhouettes. And he thought, this is the main American fleet. He had found his destiny. Signal the fleet, Kurita ordered. Prepare for engagement. Full speed ahead. And so began one of the most impossible, heroic, and chaotic battles in naval history. The Battle Off Samar. The Japanese guns roared. Shells the size of cars screamed across the water, lifting geysers hundreds of feet high. Destroyers darted through the waves like angry insects. Planes took off from the tiny American decks, armed with nothing but courage and smoke. They dove through anti-aircraft fire, dropped depth charges and flares instead of bombs, anything to distract the enemy. From above, it looked like a slaughter. From within, it became legend. One American destroyer, the USS Johnston, led by Commander Ernest Evans, charged straight into the Japanese line, against battleships 10 times its size. Kurita, stunned, watched as this small ship vanished into the smoke, firing torpedoes, shells, and rage. Within minutes, explosions ripped through his own formation. He thought he was being attacked by an entire fleet. But it was only a handful of men who refused to die quietly. For hours, the sea turned into a storm of fire and confusion. Kurita's ships fired in every direction. Radio messages screamed over each other. One captain reported he was being attacked by aircraft carriers. Another reported torpedoes from the west, but there were none. Radars flickered, jammed, and died. And in the chaos, Kurita began to realize the truth. This wasn't a battle of strength. It was a battle of perception. He wasn't fighting an enemy he could see, he was fighting a phantom built from courage and radio waves. By afternoon, he looked out across the burning sea. Wreckage floated everywhere, both Japanese and American. The Yamato's massive guns were silent now. His officers waited for orders. Kurita said nothing. He had advanced through the smoke, through the illusion, and what he found wasn't victory. It was emptiness. No great American carrier fleet. No decisive battle. Only chaos, confusion, and thousands of lives lost for nothing. That night, as the survivors gathered under the dim red lights of the flagship, Kurita gave the most controversial order of his life. Turn the fleet around. The officers were silent. Some cried. Others stared at him in disbelief. He, the samurai admiral, was retreating. But Kurita wasn't running from fear. He was facing the truth. The age of honor was ending. The age of machines had won.